Are you seeking to understand who you are, what you want from life, and where you fit into this busy world? The Man That Can Project Self-Discovery Program is the program to help you answer those questions. This program with 3 comprehensive modules helps you get clear on who you are as a man, what you want from your life, and where you can set yourself up to thrive. Throughout this program, you're going to dive deep on some of the life's questions that only the most successful people ever spend time to answer. It's not only about standing out in this busy world, but it is using your life experiences to create a better life for yourself. I know that I wish I had this when I started my journey. It would have helped me fast track success and get clear on what was truly important. Once you complete this program, you're going to have a better sense of direction and purpose for your life. You will have more confidence and resilience and a complete roadmap to create the life that you want. Don't wait for tomorrow. Start today. Head over to themanthatcanproject.com and check out the self-discovery program. I can promise you, your life will never be the same.
Welcome back, team. Another brilliant episode is about to happen. Now, before we dive in, as I have been saying the last couple of weeks, I would love you to take a moment to recognize something great that you've done over the last 7 days or since the last episode. You know, a little humble brag, something for myself, for those who read the newsletter. You will have seen down the bottom, I always document the personal progress and upcoming things. But last week, I managed to hit I rode a 38.2 kilometer run, which is correct, on Friday. So every 45 minutes on the hour, I ran for 5 hours. So essentially I had a 15-minute break every hour for a 5-hour run, which was a cool experience. It was definitely more challenging than I was expecting, but gave me a high amount of confidence in the condition of my legs, as the next day I pulled up completely fine, went for another run. So very happy with that. Next thing that happened is the workshop. So I fly back to Australia in 2 days. I'm so excited to get back to catch up with everyone, run this workshop, see my family. I've got to check out our rental property and a few other things. And finally, from the marriage standpoint, we went on a date night last night to a restaurant called Bad Idea. And you sort of look at a name like that and you're like, I hope this isn't a bad idea. But it was incredible food. It was like a French/Asian inspired kind of meal. And it was unlike anything I've ever had before. So I really enjoyed that. Ate way too much, but hey, that's the benefit of running a lot. What's coming up? The rebrand. You may have seen on social media, I'm testing new names. I'll do a whole episode about this, but I do feel I have reached a point where I'm evolving from the Man That Can project. I want to step out under my own name, and I'm just at a different chapter in life. So while I've had the Man That Can project for 7 years, this podcast since 2017, I'll still keep this podcast where it is. However, the name will change, and I'm hoping to have it ready by episode 600. So stay tuned for that. The Academy, that is also changing. It's going to be more specific on the outcome that it delivers. I've just noticed that I've lost my way with it in regards to the clarity around what results members who come in. So I'll share more about that. So that's very exciting. Today's episode. So I want to put a warning on here. I'm talking with Jackson Rowden, who is my related, right? Funnily enough. And we met, 6 weeks prior to the recording of this. And Jackson shares his journey of recovery from heroin and prescription opioids and an addiction that he had. So if you're struggling with addiction or conversations like this may trigger you, you may want to skip it as he does talk a lot about personal experience. But on the most empowering line of results, he has now gone through 12-step and actually is a business owner in the space of helping people recover. So he owns Counterpoint Recovery with a few business partners, and they aim to raise the standard of addiction treatment and inspire other facilities to improve and raise the standard. So you can expect to hear about how addiction can have a profound impact on an individual's life and the lives of their loved ones. Recovery from addiction often requires a combination of personal willingness, professional help, and community support. And we get very vulnerable, honest, and you need to have a willingness to change. So I'm very proud of this episode just because I feel like it's 30 years in the making, as you'll hear. And I'm also it's very cool to meet a family member that you'd never met and have so many commonalities, and I guess be in a similar line of work where you're really wanting to help men live the best or be the best version of themselves. So that's enough from me. Let's dive into this episode. And if you do enjoy it, make sure you share it on social media and tag me and leave a rating and review. Thank you. This conversation kind of feels surreal, Jackson. We only met about 6 weeks, really. But as you said before, it's kind of a conversation that's probably been about 30 years in the making. Our parents are cousins, and we dropped in to visit your mum and you guys when we were cruising through Atlanta, and recognized that we had a fair bit in common. Obviously, you and I are trying or have a similar passion to help men, improve their lives. I'm doing that through carving out better lives through goal setting, productivity tips, and community. And you have co-founded Counterpoint Recovery, which has one goal, which is to provide lasting and effective solutions to those who are suffering. And that goal manifests from experiencing renewed hope and recovering through your own journey. So it's pretty cool to be having this conversation, to see that we're in a similar line of work as well, even though it is, I guess different in how we go about doing it. So thanks for jumping on, man.
Right on, brother. Happy to be here. Yeah. 30 years in the making. I don't know how. I was trying to think back on, wasn't there at least a Christmas or a Thanksgiving or something where I met you along the way? But, Here we are, right?
It is wild. Hey, that's one thing as I've gotten older, I've been really trying to make an effort to spend time and connect with extended family, especially like cousins. And obviously now I don't even know, does that make us like triple cousins? I don't even know what it makes us. Probably
we're
nothing.
Second cousins, I think, if they fact checked us. But your last name's Stuart, my middle name's Stuart. We got, a lot
We're connected.
We're connected, man. We're thoroughly connected, and we should have met. I'm sorry we haven't, probably because I've been living on the other side of the world from you, but for most of it. But yeah, man, I'm really excited to hear about how our lives are kind of, in a way, parallel, but we never have had a conversation until now, man.
It's pretty interesting, man. I got drawn into your story. Obviously, your mum gave us, Tina gave us a bit of an insight before you rocked up, and then we had a bit more of a yarn. And you've been sober for 10 plus years since recovering from heroin and obviously prescription opioids addiction and all of that sort of stuff. And you came from working in the film and TV industry, and now obviously you've moved into the space that you're working in now. I'd love to hear more about what it was like in those earlier years when you, I guess, first tried heroin and all that sort of stuff, and how that addiction really took over and the impacts that it had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I got sober in August of 2013. So I'm not fronting myself any time because no one would front me drugs. But if I make it to this August, I'll be 11 years sober.
That's unreal.
Yeah, man, it's a trip. I remember sitting in a rehab and in 2013, and I wouldn't have even been there for 30 days at that time. And they used to bring guys in from this program called H&I, right? Hospitals and institutions. And they were kind of they were a technical representative of Alcoholics Anonymous communities in the area, right? So guys can volunteer for this kind of stuff, and they get sent out to places. And they came to do an H&I talk at the rehab I was in. And I'd never been to AA. I'd never even tried to get sober at the time. So I was a 23-year-old kid sitting in there listening to these guys. And I remember one of them had 10 years. And I sat there and I listened to him for a few minutes. And then I honestly kind of spaced out. But I was thinking, if I'm 23 now, if I had 10 years sober, I'd be 33. And the life I imagined that I'd have sitting there, I can kind of remember what I was into back then and what I was thinking a little bit. And my life looks nothing like what I imagined it would. It's completely surpassed any possible understanding or imaginative expression of what I had. This whole process is it's shot me into a life that I never even knew I could have or expected or even wanted. So it's really cool, man. But yeah, so heroin, I love heroin. I can say that with transparency at almost 11 years sober. It's like breaking up with a girl that you just had to break up with. She went and married another guy and she had kids and she's happy and he's got a lot of money and you've got no shot. It's never going to work for you. That's kind of my relationship with that drug.
Puts it into perspective.
Yeah. My mouth still waters when someone says the word. I still can remember vividly the feeling of some of my best highs. But I can also still very tangentially kind of contextualize the pain it caused me. I can remember some of the worst moments that I felt as a heroin addict, the pain that I felt getting off of it and struggling to live as a active heroin user. And it's like a Libra scale. You know, every day you're kind of balancing between those two feelings. And I'd be lying if I said that, I never think about it or I don't have an emotional kind of reminiscence about it every once in a while. But I have lived thoroughly clean and abstinent from all drugs and alcohol for over a decade now. And it is possible.
Let's take a quick break.
Are you tired of waking up with a dry mouth, feeling sluggish? I was too, until I discovered the power of mouth taping. I read a book called Breathe, and it opened my eyes to how I could get a better sleep. So I started taping my mouth and the results were astounding. Not only did I wake up feeling refreshed, but the data on my Whoop suggested I was getting more REM and more deep sleep, which led to me feeling better every morning. But I wanted a better solution, not just sticky tape, something that was effective and comfortable. That is why I co-founded Recover Right with a few friends. We are dedicated to helping Australians get fast and easy access to mouth tape and nose tape so you can breathe better, sleep better, and recover right. Use the discount code TMTCP for 10% off at the checkout. Sleep better with Recover Right.
So going through, obviously you still think about it and you have the emotional connection to it. Like you can still remember some of the highest highs and those moments, but you also remember some of the pain that it caused you as well. And how do you go about balancing that? Like do you have moments where you feel you want to use again, or have you got a belief within you that it's not part of who you are anymore?
It's the latter, but that takes time, right? Like very early on in my recovery, there was a lot of times where I thought I might get high again. There was a lot of times where I felt tempted to get high again. And what I had back then and what I really needed and what I'm really grateful that I was either provided with or intervened upon by was, a solution that worked for me, that I felt aspiration and attractiveness to go and chase it and try it. And that was, I got sober using the 12 steps. I went to AA a lot. I still go. Like I said, I went to treatment. There were solutions that were put in front of me that I was willing and open and, honest with myself. And I knew where I was at, and I just pursued that. And when times came up where I felt tempted, I just, I did what Nancy Reagan said: just say no. You know what I mean? And that was really hard, but I wouldn't have been able to do it alone. I definitely didn't do it alone. Wouldn't have been able to do it alone. And I wouldn't have been able to do it with some sort of foundation of principled way of living, discipline, community, accountability, and a deep willingness to want to change, to get something different.
What was it that made you want to change? Because obviously we've sort of jumped to coming out the other side. Obviously 2013 was your sober date. If we were to backtrack to when it all began, like what was going on in your life then? What was the introduction to it? And was it something that you, I guess, had always wanted to experience, or was there a lack of meaning in your life? Or I guess what
you want to hear some war stories, huh?
Yeah, I want to hear some war stories. Let's hear some war stories.
Right on. Yeah. So, my family. Shit, we are family. My mom is the best. My dad's
She's
a
awesome.
great guy, man. He's a lovely guy. They split when I was really young. So right after we moved to America, I think in the process of moving to America, they were like really just in the shitter.
Yep.
And it wasn't long after we moved here that they split. And he was in corporate business, so he was always, he supported us. So he was going wherever he could go to get a job to support us, right? I don't think he necessarily wanted to leave, but in fact, I know he didn't want to leave, but there were a lot of things that happened that kind of, causality of it. It was he had to leave. So he went on to just keep bouncing around job to job, state to state. He actually ended up moving back to Australia for a while there, but I didn't have a bad life. I come from good stock. I come from, upper middle class, and we were never like filthy rich and just do whatever you want, Jackson. But it was always like, if I needed or wanted something, I got it. Like I had great family. And, I just got like, once I was exposed to drugs and I realized like, oh, these exist. Man, I loved them. I just wanted to get right in. Like I started drinking and smoking when I was smoking, reefer and smoking cigarettes and shit when I was like 13 or 14. And by the time I was 16, I was doing a lot of cocaine. And I remember when I was around 16 or 17 years old, that was in the States, at least, that was kind of the real peak of the OxyContin epidemic. And I mean, you could get these things anywhere, everywhere. And back then they were seriously cool shit. That was peak OxyContin. And a lot of people were dying. A lot of people were having a good time. And it just was this whirlwind of kind of not knowing you didn't even know what you were doing. There was all this stuff now, these great shows and all this information and this epidemic, right? Back then, none of that. There was none of that. There was no talk of that. You could find these things in every pill cabinet in every house in America that you went into for a party or hanging out at your friend's house. Everybody had them. Oh, yeah. And no one knew what they had. They had like a loaded gun in the cabinet. And you could find these things relatively easy, and I got hooked on them really quick, just like anyone else that did them. And then very abruptly, I remember it kind of there near the end of high school when I was going off to university. I went to college here in the States, and there was this big crackdown. That's kind of when the conversation shifted, right? And either the government or the alphabet guys, whoever was, I think it might have been the DEA or whatever, put a big kibosh on it, right? And they started changing the molecular makeup of them and restricting them and taking them off the streets and shuttering all these, dirty doctors and these guys who were getting all these kickbacks for writing the prescriptions for them. And that really, everybody just kind of pivoted from there. And I remember being a part of a group of people that like one day all my friends were using Oxy, and the next day all these normal kids were like, no, we're doing heroin now. And that kind of scary word that was, the guy under the bridge begging for money your whole life kind of just became your casual like Friday night drug. And I just didn't like the feeling that I felt when I wasn't on this stuff, and I kind of threw away all of my predispositions or my belief systems or my judgment and just dove right in, man. And that lasted for, like I said, 17 or 18 years old until I was 23 when I stopped. So it was a good 5 or 6 years at least where I was just hooked.
So the opioid or the oxycodone was like the gateway drug into heroin for you personally?
For me, yes. And for a lot of people that I knew who, if they're still with us today, who we grew up together and ran around together, would tell you the same thing. Yeah.
It's scary how there is the gateways. Like I remember thinking about it a lot when I was growing up around weed and everything like that. And I started smoking weed at about 14 at the skate park and didn't try ecstasy until I think I was in grade 11 or 12. So 16, 17, and then it led to cocaine and MDMA and all that sort of stuff. And it was always like what I ended up on was scary in the beginning, but then once you sort of get used to one specific drug and then you hang out with someone else who introduces you to something else and you say no for a little bit and then you see that they seem to be having what seems to be a better time and they're still kicking around, you're like, oh, okay, maybe it's not as bad as all the warning signs, and then you crack on to the next one and you find yourself in a pretty bad position doing some things that maybe you don't want to be doing. But as you said earlier in the conversation, like if I think about cocaine, I can still feel that metallic taste in my mouth and like that instant
ether.
high, and you
Yeah.
feel bulletproof, and you're like, man, I love that. I could do with that in some moments in life, especially when I'm trying to close business deals and whatnot.
Sure.
But
Yeah, sure.
there's also the flip side of that, of the how it unraveled in life and the consequences of that as well.
Yep. And I was faced with those really quick.
What was the moment when you realized you had a problem with it? Like it went from, I guess, recreational to, fuck, I'm like addicted to this. I need this.
Well, yeah, I mean, not to sound patronizing, but if you know anything about them, I mean, they're opiates and things of that nature. They don't really let you forget about them when you get off them, right? So once you get a little tolerance built up and your body acclimates to it, you're using them with some degree of frequency, you're not just going to put that remote down and walk away. It's a physical, biological, neuropathical reaction that you notice, and they call it the kick. People say they're dope sick, all that stuff. Like, you can call it whatever you want. It hurts. You notice it, and it really hijacks you, man. I mean, there ain't much you can do until you get well. There isn't many responsibilities or relationships or consequences that'll, at least for me, that I came up against that were going to get in the way of me doing that stuff. And as that reliance and that chemical dependency grew and grew and grew to such a level that pain was so immense, so did the consequences and the delusional, irrational thinking and the choices I made to get it, right? And it's a very progressive, very compounding thing.
What were some of the things that you did do to get it that maybe looking back you not regret, but weren't displaying who you wanted to be as an individual, I guess?
I had a big problem with the law, authority, right? So I got arrested quite a few times, never did any serious time down, but was going in and out of jails a lot, and it was getting worse and worse every time. It went from, oh, you got a handful of pot in your pocket and pipe, to, okay, now you're in the car with some scary shit and scary people, and now you're getting into altercations with police, you're getting into, big trouble where time's starting to look like the thing that's going to happen next, right? This isn't just going to be, oh, you're a good young kid who just needs his parents anymore. It's, you're a detriment to society. And yeah, that was bad. I mean, I definitely, I wouldn't call myself like a highbrow criminal, but I was, I would rob and steal and didn't really care who it was from. And like I said, there was nothing I wasn't doing, man. I wasn't really like a guy that laid myself out bare sexually or anything. That wasn't my thing. There was an element of the thrill and the danger, and growing up in Atlanta, Georgia, it's kind of, back then it was just kind of there was a cool part of the city that was exciting and dangerous, but then there was like suburbs where I lived, which was just like fucking boring, and I needed to get out of there. I just was like, I'd rather be downtown doing some shady shit and, running with people that I thought were interesting, and they're just all deadbeats. I was just chasing some sort of escape, some sort of excitement that I wasn't getting, that I wasn't feeling, and that I didn't want to feel the things that I was feeling.
Do you feel, had you been exposed to or presented the opportunity of more exciting things that engaged you, you potentially wouldn't have gone down that path? I guess knocking around with the wrong people, doing shady shit, looking for the excitement?
I mean, you never know, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know, and that definitely wasn't a thing. What was really big for me, dude, was like, it wasn't that I didn't have access to stuff. That's what I'm saying. It's like, it wasn't that was my nature. That wasn't my nature. My nature was fine. I had opportunity. I could really, if I said, hey, Ma, Dad, I want to go do this, I think it'll be good for me because I'm really excited and passionate about doing it. I probably would have had a chance to go do it, or they would have helped me find a way. The problem was I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I was young. I was dumb. I was, just very emotional and very reactive. And, it's hard for you to even, like I said, the majority of the decision was made when I was, barely a teenager. And then by the time I got to like my late teens, I was already fully down the drain. So there wasn't much choice I had after that. That became my nature. And before I knew it, like you asked me earlier, what was it, the thing that I realized, like that was the moment where I needed to get out of this, was I realized really quickly, obviously all this shit's bad. I could rationalize and justify how cool, or this is why I'm doing it is, but once I started, I couldn't stop. And once I started, I kind of didn't want to stop. And that's when I could, even though I didn't want to admit it, when I was alone in my room asleep or trying to go to sleep in the middle of the night, sitting there staring at the ceiling, sick, the same thought always came up. You're toast here, man. You've got no more control over this than anyone. So eventually I had to get brave and I had to make a shift. And I'm really grateful I got the opportunity to do that. A lot of people I know didn't.
And when you say they didn't, was that because their life, they didn't make it through, or they didn't have the support systems?
Sure. Yeah. No, a lot of people's lives were cut short. I lost a lot of friends who died very young from overdoses. At least a dozen very close to me who I was, sitting in class with and hung out on the weekends with, are gone forever. A lot of the guys I was running around with are still sitting down. They're somewhere. I don't even keep tabs on them anymore, but they went away for a long time. They aren't coming out for a while. And if they're out now, they've missed the best part of their life because of this stuff. So yeah, I dodged a bullet for real.
It's interesting how you were mentioning before, obviously young, dumb, didn't really know who you were or what you wanted. And I can relate to when you were saying that.
Yeah.
It made me start thinking about like when I used to hang out at the skate park or play rugby or anything that I did, like there was this inferior complex where I just never felt good enough. And so anything that I did, regardless of the environment, I wanted to be the best. And I guess the idea around what being the best was getting the validation. So I was hanging around the skate park, that meant smoking bongs and trying to be a good skateboarder and chasing girls and getting into fights. And then if I was in the rugby scene, it was doing all the things that I needed to do to really elevate myself there. And some of them, I guess, were beneficial to my life and a lot of them necessarily weren't. And I think because I was chasing that and I wasn't even aware of that, it confused me more as an individual around who I was and what I actually valued and the value that I had to offer, because I was never taught to, I guess, care for myself and appreciate who I was and value who I was. So I was always seeking that from other people. Mm-hmm. And I guess the advice I wish I gave myself or was given when I was younger was just lean into the things that you love and you are good enough. And I think there's so many things that influence that, but that just sort of sprung to mind when you were saying that they're obviously young, dumb, and I think a lot of blokes who listen to this will be nodding their head as well, feeling like they've done a lot of things when they were younger, or maybe are still doing things now because they don't have clarity around who they are and what they want to stand for and who they need to surround themselves with. You said, Jackson, you were given an opportunity to sort your I guess problem out and walk through the addiction. What was that like? And I guess as well, what was the toll it was taking on your family as well? Were they supporting you? Had they sort of got to the point where they had to cut ties? What was all that looking like?
Yeah, no, it went all the way to zero for me. So I guess what I took away from that was I felt very misunderstood. I was waiting around for the people, places, and things around me to change so that I could step into them and things would be better. And, the truth was I just didn't understand myself. And like you said, who does when you're that young? When we're all kids, like we're supposed to fuck up. We're supposed to be dumb. Our brain hasn't finished developing. So the expectation that, oh, I should be able to figure this out and yada, 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 that's bullshit. And then I looked back for a long time, dude, thinking, oh, if only I'd been taught, oh, it's my dad's fault, or it's my mom's fault, or it's this coach's fault, or this guy, this cop, whoever. It's like, nobody knows what they're doing, especially parents. And so to segue into what you're asking, by the end of the time that I put them through, putting myself through it first, but putting them through kind of as a ripple effect, my parents were lost for cause. They didn't even know what was going on. I think they were probably ready to write me off as much as they would say no. They should have. And in the end, they did in a pseudo kind of way. I was living in California when I got sober. So I'd moved. I hadn't been there but maybe a year and a half or 2 years at most. I don't even think so. And things got so bad out there that, because you're a new fish in an even bigger pond and you got to fight even harder and get, it just became even more of a drudge. That I wasn't even really enjoying this kind of aspirational goal of like growing up and moving to California and making it big. And I felt very defeated and I felt very alone and lost. And I was living with my dad out there. He was, kind or manipulated enough to let me sleep in a room in his house. And I remember him being really, I could tell he was really at the end of his wits, and he didn't know what to do. And my mom, who was back here in Atlanta still, had been put through so much shit at close range, collateral damage for the last decade, was kind of like, you just call me when you want help. Otherwise, I don't know what to do for you, man. Like, I'm here for you. I love you, but I mean, the well's dry. There's no more. I had taken so much from her and kept her up so many nights that I think she was just like, she was running on fumes, And I remember calling her one morning and just saying, the gig's up. I can't do it anymore. I don't want to do it. And I didn't even know what I wanted to do, but she called me back and she said, I'll help you one time. And she called a friend of a friend who knew a guy who went to rehab in California kind of thing. And she said, these guys are going to call you. And if you can get up there, they'll take you. They take your insurance. She had checked and she said, they'll take your insurance. And I didn't even know I had insurance, Yeah. And she said, if they answer and you want to go, you go. If you don't, it is what it is. And they called me and I did a pre-assessment kind of thing. If anyone's ever been to rehab, they ask you a bunch of questions and, kind of lure you in. And because, you got to reel us in, us drug addicts. We're like big fish. And we run. But yeah, they said, if you can get up here, you're ready to go. We got a bed for you. And I packed my shit and hopped in the car. And my dad lived in Orange County, so I had to get to LA. And that's like a 2.5 hour drive in traffic. You get there in an hour if you didn't have traffic. But it took me 8 hours to get up there because I had to fucking stop and this and that. Talk myself out of it over here, stopped in Long Beach to change my mind, yada, yada, yada.
That would have been an interesting conversation to watch.
Oh, fuck. If anyone could have been a fly on the wall that day, man, I would love to see that person. But I remember I got there, I sat at the end of the driveway in my car and I finished the bag I had. And I was just kind of.
Did you really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, dude. I can't believe I got there. I cannot believe it, dude. And no one had to drag me. But so I finally stumbled up the driveway, just completely off my ass. And I sat down in there and I did everything they said. And here I am. That was 10 plus years ago today. So
what was it? Was there anything that stood out to you during your time in rehab that had a significant impact?
Yeah. That program, I don't know if they're around anymore. They were in California. And that program was 12-step based, I guess. So they'd take you to meetings and they wanted you to be doing the steps and they wanted you to be involved and showing up. If they took you out, you got to go out, right? So I just wanted to get out because you're in this rehab with 20 other people and you don't like 95% of them. And, it's groups and therapy and this. And so when you get to go out, you're like, okay, and where are we going? And they're just going AA meeting, right? And you're coming or you're staying here. And so I just wanted to get out. And I would go to these meetings with them. And I was always open-minded to it. I'd never tried it before that. So I wasn't like, oh, I can't go to a meeting. I'm not going to do that. But I was just skeptical, I was like probably anybody else. So isn't that like a God thing and a bunch of weirdos and a church thing? And they were like, just come. You want to get out of the house or not? And I was like, fine, let's go. And I just started going and immediately heard some things that made sense and realized that I probably should have read that stuff a lot sooner. And then finally sat quietly with the reality that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And all I know is I don't know what I want. I don't even know if I'm willing to do all this shit. But I know for a fact at this point that I don't want to be doing the same thing I was doing. I need something different. Because I can't go back to that. All right, that's how I felt. And AA was the hand that reached out to help me when I was down, and that's the hand that picked me up. That's it,
It's crazy, and it's awesome that you were at a point where that hand was, I guess, put out for you at the right time when you were ready to make change. Because I know for people when they ask like, what's my rock bottom? And I talk about it, but then when I reflect on it, there were so many moments where I could have, I guess, would have been considered rock bottom before the main rock bottom. I just wasn't ready to change or accepting responsibility to change. I was always still blaming people or things outside of myself. But once I kept messing up, I was like, fuck, it's got to be me. I got to be the issue here.
Eventually, you're the asshole with all the fingers pointing at you.
Yes.
It's eventually.
And it's so confronting, but at the same time, I personally use social media to start talking about a lot of the stuff. And every time I was going to talk about something that I struggled with or something that I did that I needed to talk about, I was so anxious. But then when I spoke about it, it was like this weight had been lifted and I felt free and I felt more comfortable in who I was and I could acknowledge that I'd fucked up and all of that sort of stuff. And now that's put me in a position I'm in today where it's like, well, similar to you, like we all make mistakes. Some of us have better guidance and mentorship in our younger years and we avoid that, and some of us don't. And some of us find ourselves in situations which, I guess, pull us away, like drugs or, I guess who we hang out with in our social circles, and it's hard to get back to where we want because a lot of us want to fit in. And if the people we're trying to fit in with are doing stuff that maybe isn't the best, we'll still eventually do that because that whole cliche saying of the sum of the people you spend the most time around, it's true. Like the influence of people really rubs off on you.
It's huge, man. And especially with something like addiction, which I came to learn is such an existential kind of human thing. No matter how many times they try to throw a medication or a one-shot solution kind of thing at it, there's layers to addiction that, in hindsight, it was so clear to me. I was like, dude, I just had it all wrong. And that's okay. Like the vulnerability and the honesty of that was so relieving. And that's why when I said, AA was the hand that reached out, I couldn't make sense of the steps or any of that shit. And I definitely was just as weirded out at that time by God, the word God, as anybody else. But I heard experiences abound in every meeting I went to that not only relieved pressure from me, but also inspired hope in me in such a way that I just felt like, oh yeah, this is deeper than I thought it was. And it's okay. Like that was the first time I felt kind of, like you said, like a mentorship community type based thing. And it could have really been anything. It just happened to be that for me. Right. But I've seen many people find solutions to very similar things that I was dealing with, addiction, like we just talked about, through these types of outlets. the kind of lone wolf, I'm going to get this figured out and I'm going to suffer in silence and white knuckle it. Those guys, I've been around long enough. I'm not trying to be, the arbiter and the dictator of how someone gets sober, but it's very, very, very hard. And I've seen a lot of people fail trying to do it on their own.
I think I was doing some research before, and it's like 9% or approximately 22 million Americans are in recovery from some form of substance abuse disorder, which is 9%. And it's almost the same population as Australia, right? So if that's the amount of people who are in recovery, you can only imagine the people who aren't, like the number that aren't in. And
I see a lot of those, I see a lot of those in my field. And we're talking about a deeply, like I said, deeply existential crisis in America, not just with addiction, with a lot of things, but it's so reflective of where America is as a culture, because these types of things can be caused by many. America's always had a very kind of liberal drug problem. There's always just been access to that kind of shit here.
Yeah.
Maybe that's Mexico's fault. I don't know, right? Who cares? The point is, it's gotten progressively worse, dramatically worse now. And I think it reflects a much bigger problem, is that we got something a lot bigger here to tackle than just, okay, how do we get the right shot for these? Because we're talking about, you're saying 22 million are in recovery.
Yep.
Half that stuff's polled on a program that's called Alcoholics Anonymous and narcotics. A lot of these people aren't polling because it's an anonymous program. How are you getting the information? So,
wow.
You can look at rehabs, you can look at treatment centers, you can look at success rates like, Counterpoint and places like that. And, these types of things have very low success rates, not because they don't help people and not because they can't be effective, but because they're migratory, they're transitory, they're small windows in people's lives. And a lot of people don't continue. They fall off, they don't get the right information, they don't get connected to the right place. And they go awry and they're right back in again in a couple months. And there's something really, 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 really profound in the reality that we're looking at probably closer to 40 to 50 million people in this country right now, not just with addiction, with mental health problems, but lots of times they're co-occurring. So you'll have people with mental health problems that are drug addicts and vice versa.
Yeah.
You're talking about probably upwards of, like I said, 30 or 50 million of those, 40, 50 million of those people who aren't getting help. They don't know how to get it. They don't know where to go. They can't. In the addiction treatment industry in America, I believe, and I'm open to being corrected here, but I think the last piece of data I saw was around 4 million people got treatment last year.
4 million?
4 million people went, right? Because we can pull the intake data. We can see that, right? We can see how many people went, but what they did with it after, who knows? And then of that 22 million, of that 50 million, like what are we looking at here? We're looking at a huge percentage of the country. You said it's the population of Australia that's recovered. Yeah, that throw in Europe, throw in a lot of South America, and before you know it, we've got a real serious problem, man. So I was very grateful. I'm still very grateful. I was very grateful for the opportunity I got, and I feel very grateful every day that I'm one of the few that are able to consider and feel recovered, and then to have my purpose in life, which I thought or wanted to be so many other things as a kid, to now my purpose and my goals in life align with serving other people and helping other people. It's a very, very profound and very fortunate place to land and wind up after everything I went through,
So how did you get there? Because I remember one of the things that we were speaking about at your mum's place was how you became a sober coach, and then you were sort of following high profile individuals around for 5+ years or whatever it was, working one-on-one with like celebrities and athletes and high net worth people. And I just found that fascinating because I didn't even know that was a thing. I was like, wow. So can you, like, how'd that come about? And then I guess the transition into what you do now.
Yeah. So, I think we went over it a little bit, but if we didn't, just for people that are listening, I was along that whole time when I was struggling. Like I said, I was in high school and college for a lot of it, but right out of college, I dropped out actually. And I went into the film business. My mom's in it. Some of my other family members are in it now, my extended family as well. And, got going right away, had connections in it. That was kind of what I was going to do. It's what I wanted to do. And was running around in the film business. And by the time I got sober, I'd really kind of burned a lot of bridges there. And just, you make an ass of yourself and you lose some jobs and you fuck some shit up. And I just wanted to change everything about my life. And I got out and, like I said, kind of went on to a halfway house and was staying sober and was thinking about getting back into the film business. And then not long after, I'd been sober for over a year then, definitely, but not long into my recovery, considering how long it is now. I got some work back at the treatment center I went through to, just be an employee and be someone that helps people getting sober in there. And it was a really cool experience. But when you're working in treatment, you're working towards licenses, right? And accreditation. So I was in that treatment center with the goal of accruing enough hours of qualified work to be able to get a counseling cert, right? Something like that. And it's a long process, but it was fun and I enjoyed it and I learned a lot. And I had a lot of really great mentors in my life at the time. And I had a budding life. Nice young life. I was making some money. I had my own apartment, going to meetings. Just felt great. California had finally worked out. And some of those guys I knew who were mentors of mine did the stuff we're going to talk about. And they, I guess, saw something in me that I didn't even know I had or thought I could have. And they honestly kind of threw me to the wolves, like probably way too soon. You are supposed to have I think most people will require you to have at least 5 years or so to do this kind of work, but I did not have that. I had some friends who had friends who were starting businesses and doing it, and they kind of said, "Hey, try this kid out. He's cool and he can do it." And I got thrown onto a gig. I'll give him a shout out because I think he's a great guy. His name's Richie Blair. He owns A-List Recovery in Los Angeles. It's a fantastic company, and everyone that works there is awesome. I love Richie to death. He's an old friend of mine, and he gave me a shot. And I started working for him and went on for many years. And I worked also by myself, and I worked with other people along the way too. But I loved working with Richie. Worked the majority of the time I did this job with him. And yeah, really weirdly and quickly found myself in a niche where I was going out on cool gigs with celebrities and athletes and musicians and tours and movie sets and big businessmen with big high paying jobs on private jets and all the cool stuff, man. And with the goal of these people in most instances, either for some reason or another, they can't go to treatment for 30 days or even longer. If they shut their life down, they might lose their job or they might get found out by the press, deal with publicity problems. So they try to bring services like those that are found in treatment into these people's lives. And then you go with them. Right. And I was like, this is the weirdest shit I've ever heard of in my life.
So wild.
Probably definitely shouldn't be me, but it's a very high paying job. It's a very high perk job. Not that we're getting gifts or anything, but you're just getting to be a fly on the wall of a very cool life. Right. And I was single and young, and it was fucking awesome, and fortunately I developed skills and had learned a lot in my own experience that I was able to really have like a good effect with people. These people were getting clean or at least staying clean while I was with them. I don't know if they're getting sober, because we'll talk about that in the end, but there's a big difference between the two. But things were going well, and I felt a deep sense of purpose and just pride in being a part of helping people find a solution that works for them and not get in trouble or not get found out or not get, not lose the job. Because a lot of times you're going out to people who are, they're on the last leg of some very big consequences. If you can't get this right, this tour can't go. if you don't get this right, we can't finance this movie. And you're the person who's got to be kind of the liaison between therapists and psychiatrists and case managers and also managers and agents. And you're really kind of a hostage negotiator on one side and also like a mentor on the other. And thank God we got paid a lot, because there were a lot of times where I was stressed out of my fucking mind, but man, did I have a fun time doing that job. You know,
Dude,
a lot of good memories.
it would have been such an incredible experience, like as you said, to be a bit of a fly on the wall to some of those lifestyles and how they live. And I think one of the interesting things for me is to know that regardless of how successful people are and how much money they have, or whether they're doing the big movies, they're still human at the end of the day, and they can be having their own battles and
Absolutely
struggling with stuff, and they still need support. And unfortunately, because of their position of power, they maybe do need ways to keep it quiet, but they've still got the same goal and intent that we all do.
Yeah. And some of them don't. You know, there were a lot of conversations I had to have where it's like, hey man, the microscope's on you. You're not going to move this thing. You're going to have to wait till it moves on. And if you want to keep this, you know, $3 million contract and, you know, not wind up on the back page of you know, fucking the Daily Sun or whatever shit smear magazine there is, it's going to tattoo you all over their cover. You know, let's just keep this cool. Right. And that's like I said, you got to really know how to approach people, and you got to know how to just feel a whole room out, look around, be observant, and really identify where the trigger points are and the problems are, and it was a very problem solving oriented job that it really it took me over, man. I really enjoyed it. And then you get this, like, I thought it was cool that I get to do that and make a lot of money, and then I'm gone nine months of the year, and then you start to add a couple of years together, and you know, like I said, you know, you get to help people, and texts start coming in from family members of people you've been a part of their recovery, and hey, it's Christmas and just wanted to thank you again for giving me my son back, or helping my brother, or helping my dad, and it just blows your mind. Just blows your mind. You know?
Yeah, the ripple effect of that.
Yes. Like I said, existential human thing, you know?
For sure. How did you then get into co-founding Counterpoint Recovery, and what, like, obviously the intention with that, it's a bit more location based. You're not traveling around with people as much.
Yeah.
So how did that opportunity present itself?
Counterpoint was a materialization of an experience like the one I just described. You know, helped somebody, and their family and their friends saw the effect I was able to have. And not that it's a me thing, but I got to be the messenger of a solution, and, you know, piqued the interest of a large group of people, the family of someone who I helped, and they approached me to help them, to help other people, you know, again, the ripple, right? And Counterpoint happened mainly because I have 2 kids now. That's how good my life is. I have 2 beautiful children, a son and a daughter. I'm married happily. And that job I was just describing was not the job for a father of 2 young kids. If he wanted to stay married, it wasn't.
And 9 months a year.
Yeah. So I wanted to be around my children more, and the opportunity got put in front of me at the right time, and the right people were putting it there. You know, the people who co-founded Counterpoint as well are people that I know well, who I like and respect, and feel like want to genuinely help people. So and Counterpoint is a labor of love for a lot of people. It's not anything that's exclusive to my mind. I had a part in it. I'm grateful and I'm proud of the part I have in it. But these types of organizations and facilities have a tradition of kind of some ways being a bit sideways, and some of them are sketchy. Some of them are just bad actors looking for a quick buck. You know, the treatment industry in America is a big business. Yeah. And I felt like it was the right group of people. I felt like it was time to start to really try to raise the water level on some of these places. And the only way you do that is you either go through regulation and go through laws and just, try to hit these treatment providers with more hurdles to jump to get better, or you just put your own dog in the fight and go, we're going to play our way and we're going to do our thing the way we know to do it. And hopefully it'll inspire people to change their lives in the facility, and then transversely also inspire the people in your community or your city to raise the water level on a competitive level. Get better if you want to compete with better programs that are better run with better people who care more.
It's a good way to look at it, right? I'd never even thought about that. Obviously, a lot of people try to change regulations, but you've gone the other approach and just put your dog in the fight, as you said, and are just doing things better, introducing your own standards and producing results that way.
Yeah. And,
I love that.
A lot of counterpoint, like I said, it served a purpose for me. It was the right group of people. But I've learned so much being a part of it. And I've learned things that I didn't learn all those years. Business is hard. Small businesses are even harder. I'm both good at things and bad at things. And you have to mess stuff up and fuck up to learn about not only yourself, but about how to do this stuff, business, right? And the only way you're going to get in there and figure it out is you got to just get in there and figure it out. So I looked at this, and I still do, as a massive learning experience for me, one that I've never had in my life. And also an opportunity to, whether you win, lose, or draw with your approach or your goal, we want to do this, and I'd love to raise the water level, and that, I mean that, but sometimes shit just doesn't work out, right? And I don't know, I can't see into the future, but I know what my intention was, and I know what I put on paper is good and it'll work. And I also know that even if it doesn't, you'll learn what to do next. Everything kind of just, I've gone to a very quiet, steady place of letting the world indicate to me the next right action, not trying to, willfully, ragefully control and bend it to fit my will. And a lot of times I'm just following signs, man. That's been a lot of my recovery. I'm just following the signs. I try to slow myself down to a degree to where I can hear the trees moving around me and, listen to my son when he talks to me and look at what people are trying to tell me through what they're doing and what's being presented to me, instead of just what I want and what I'm not getting and what's going on in between my two ears. It's a scary place to be, man.
I can relate to listening to what you feel is the right thing, and then obviously letting the market or the world to present the next opportunities and lessons for you, because very similar to you, where I started the Man That Can project back in 2017 was very heavily focused on mental health, because that was the biggest problem I had been working on since about 2014. Like, how do I improve my self-esteem, my confidence, various things around that. So I felt I could talk about that, and I wanted to learn from a lot of people. And over the years, it's evolved into what it is now. And my intent was very different back then to as it is now. But I guess from a big picture, it's like it's still just trying to create what I believe is a better life. So talking about things, even, talking about addiction with you, I never went to rehab, or I never had, I would consider hectic addiction. I loved drugs and I loved smoking and stuff, but I wouldn't say it.
You were like experimental.
Yeah.
You were experimental.
Correct. But I still love learning about it, and I still think it's something that I should talk about and learn about, because you mentioned earlier, there's definitely even scales of addiction, right? So everyone's different on that scale or pendulum, let's call it. So having the conversations allows me to connect with and resonate with, or not even resonate, but understand people a little bit more. And by having you on here with your conversation and your experience, opens that up to other people who are, whether they are struggling still, or they're in recovery, or they have never experienced it, just gives you insight to be more empathetic with people.
Yeah. I mean, dude, listening to yourself and then also being able to be honest about what you're hearing and then vulnerable enough to ask for help or just say it out loud is a thing that I think a lot of people could, if they don't already know it and they're not already trying it, they could probably benefit from doing it. You know,
Yep.
it's, and sounds like what you found was you found that, hey, there's things I don't like about myself and I'm tired of waiting for somebody else to fix it or hoping that this other thing is going to change it. I just want to do it myself. And that's a brave thing, man.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you, would there be anything anyone could have done to stop you going down the path you went down? And if that's a no, like that just was the course that it had to be, what advice would you have wished you or you wished you would have listened to earlier?
I don't know, man. Maybe just, I think I don't spend a lot of time in the past, right? I find that I spend too much time in the future now, right? And if I'm not in the present, which is where I'm at my best, I'm thinking too much about the future. That's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
The past very, 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 very infrequently, if at all, ever is anything that has to do with what I think about anymore, which is a really great place to be. But if I had to think back on what could have happened, I don't even necessarily know if it's worth it. As much as it's probably not the answer you want, it's not worth it to even think about, because if it could have or would have, it should have, it would have, right?
Yep.
I think if anybody out there is arrogant enough to think that heroin won't get them addicted, it'll be different for me. It's not going to do that to me. You're wrong. I can say that with a resounding confidence. I think, like, if I could offer anything in hindsight to somebody who might be there or is worried that someone they love might be there, I can say this, man. The loneliest I've ever felt in my life was when I was struggling at that time. Addiction, and also at that age, I was the loneliest I'd ever felt. I was the most disconnected I've ever felt. Everything's superfluous. Everything's surface level when you're a teenager. Everything's, jockeying and vying for social hierarchy, and, I'm better than he is, and she wants me more than, it's all bullshit, Such an immature place to be. And I think maybe if I had tried some sort of community thing back then more, I was involved in sports though. It wasn't like I didn't have a community. I think if there was something more oriented towards real kind of just human conversations instead of let's go win this game, right? That might have helped maybe, but I don't think there was anything, dude. I think this is just supposed to be part of my story, and I'm still figuring out where it's going to take me. But I live with peace with it now,
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I would direct people to your socials, but you're not on socials.
Not second best decision I ever made after stopping heroin was to get off social media.
Why?
Well, that's your ballpark, man. That's a mental health thing. I felt different. I felt like that stuff, it just got in the way of real human connection. It got in the way of my attention. It got in the way of my ability to regulate my sense of direction in life. I think, I'll go here's another little war story. I happened to have a client a few years ago who I was with in South America with some very powerful people, not drug people. They were tech people, cryptocurrency and things like that specifically. And very interesting people, very intelligent people. And we were down there for some business stuff that my client was doing. And I had a conversation with a guy who happened to work at a big consulting firm in America. And consulting firms here in the States, they're everywhere, by the way, but here in the States, they are behind a lot of really nefarious things. This guy worked at a consulting firm that may or may not have had a huge contribution to the OxyContin epidemic, right? So that's me not naming anyone without naming. But I had a really great conversation with him over a cigar at a rooftop pool in South America at this beautiful hotel. And we talked for hours, man. And he was telling me a lot about, the nuances of the technology and the things that these companies are doing with social media platforms and the algorithms they're using, the people who are developing these algorithms. And I had already been off social media for a period of time there, and that's actually what inspired the conversation. But this man told me very, very bluntly and clearly, and he was very, very qualified, that this is not the kind of thing that we should be giving children. It's not the type of thing we should, as adults, be spending a lot of time on. And I think we do. And I think, without judging everybody and trying to be some Debbie Downer party pooper, I chose to get off because I felt a way when I was on it that man confirmed was right. And I've stayed off since. My gut was right. The facts aligned. And I said, I'm happy I made the decision. Right. Now, do I want to look at hot chicks on Instagram? Sure. But I'm married and there's no point, man. I'm happy. I don't need it for anything. My business doesn't do any worse. I mean, it might do better if I had it. I wouldn't know, but I do just fine without it. So same as I do with heroin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those two things I don't miss life with them.
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of people would agree with you there. That's for sure.
yeah.
What was that?
Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
I was going to say, just finally, you mentioned earlier the difference between recovery and sober, or being sober. There was like a difference. There was something we were going to touch on.
Oh yeah, being clean and being sober.
Yeah, sorry, that's
yeah. Again, I don't like to be an arbiter or anything, but it was brought to my attention when I was young and I was starting to get, my recovery journey, that being clean and being sober are two different things. And take that as you will. Tell me I'm full of shit if you want, but I found in my life that they are two very different things. And sobriety is a state of mind, body, and spirit to me. And I work very hard every day to protect and maintain that stability that I call my sobriety. Being clean is a part of it. That doesn't just mean no heroin. It means what I put in my body, on all fronts, nutrition wise. I do like Zins still, but
yeah,
you got to have a measure, right? It's like,
they're blowing
gotta
up
have something here. But I take that with a grain of salt. I think that's not said enough, and I think if there was one thing that I could offer to your community and your listeners, is, if they haven't heard that, a lot of people in this world get sober or get clean, or whatever they want to call it. They find recovery from their pain in many ways. And there's a lot of ways you can do it. The ultimate goal is, do you feel happy? Do you feel fulfilled? Are you of purpose and service to your family, your friends, your community, to the world? If all those things are happening, then all this shit is semantic, right? Doesn't matter how you get to that. But as a young guy who was really suffering and struggling and didn't know which way was up, it made a big difference for me to hear there's a difference between clean and sober. If you chase being clean, you're only chasing a percentage of what you could achieve. You're only going to ever achieve something that's only going to give you so much relief and so much solution. And I chase sobriety. I chase, like I said, a state of mind, body, and spirit. And I found it all, man. I found the gold. What is that place? The El Dorado, the gold city. I found it, man. Pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So I hope that anybody who hears this might decide to change and chase that thing too.
I love it, man. It's definitely good to distinguish that.
Yeah.
But Jackson, it's been awesome to catch up, man. I'm sure we'll definitely do it again, and I want to come back down to Atlanta.
Now we have to just start talking and just be cousins now. Second cousin.
Yeah, legit. It has to happen.
Half our life we just didn't work. Let's make it work.
We got the next 70 odd years.
Yeah, man. And just let me know how I can help you and your community, man. We're all here for each other, right?
Appreciate it. And likewise, once the once this goes live, I'm sure there'll be some questions coming through that I'll be able to send through to you. I'll be your product of social media that can send the feedback down.
My liaison.
Yeah.
You want me, you got to find Lachlan, man. Hit him up. He knows how to get to me.
And for anyone in America who's listening who is experiencing addiction or anything like that, I'll put the links to Counterpoint Recovery in the show notes there, so you can go check it out and see if it may be something that can add some value to your life.
Yeah. And if anyone out there is suffering, there is a solution. There's one that will work for you. Go find it. You can change it at any time, anywhere, Australia, America, whatever. It takes us to fix this. The government, the companies, they're not going to do it for us, guys. All right? So hit Lockie up, hit whoever you know who's sober up, ask for help. People want to help.
Thank you for listening to the Man That Can Project podcast. My name is Lachlan Stuart, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. If you did, please take a moment to rate and review the Man That Can Project on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our newest episodes. We'll see you again next time.